Right, so this video contains jokes about suicide and other questionable topics. So if you think that's going to ruin your day, please don't watch it. But someone keeps making those jokes, so I gotta assume that someone else is laughing at them. And before we dive into who makes these jokes, who laughs at them, and why, I'd like to say a couple of things up front. 1. Humor and suicidal ideation have walked hand in hand for at least 100 years, as evidenced by Dorothy Parker's infamous resume, first published in 1926. So the history of morbid smart-assery, at least here in the United States, is a respectively long one, if not necessarily a proud one. And 2. Are we certain that jokes about suicide are more harmful to the general populace than, say, jokes about misogyny?
I also happen to like it when feminists attack these fat-ass housewives who think there's nothing more to life than sitting home on the telephone, drinking coffee, watching TV, and pumping out a baby every 9 months. Ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom.
How about assault?
Mother Earth, raped again. Guess who? Hey, she was asking for it.
Feel free to file those questions away in temporary storage while I use the androgynous sounds of my voice in attempt to answer the controversial question. Are suicide jokes ever okay? Back in my misspent youth, I was a fat, lonely child who noticed around age 12 that humor did not have a body type, and I could get positive attention if I learned to be funny. I was later reminded, circa 2014, that this course of action was not unique to me by Jason Pargin at Cracked.com, who did a pretty poignant job of explaining how humorists are made more so than they are born. At an early age, you start hating yourself. Maybe you were weird or fat or whatever. You're not like the other kids. The other kids don't seem to like you, and you can usually detect that by age 5 or so. At some point, you did something that got a laugh from the room, and you realized for the first time that you could get a positive reaction. Not genuine love or affection, mind you, just a reaction. One that is a step up from hatred, and 1,000 steps up from invisibility. Or put another way, by someone somewhat more famous.
And that's all it was a reward, a psychic reward, when you're a kid and you find out that you can get the attention of adults, and approval, and a little bit of respect, and you just hunger for it, you keep going back for it.
But if I can steer us back to my weird childhood for a minute. In those days, I heard a quote that stuck with me. A quote so good, it was claimed by multiple French writers, including Molière, then stolen and made famous among English speakers by a guy named Horace Walpole. And that quote was, "Life is a tragedy to those who feel, and a comedy to those who think." While the international committee who claimed that quote likely thought of it as little more than a pithy philosophical statement to get laid by, it is particularly applicable to writers in that two storytellers can look at the same event, and the guy with an eye for drama may come up with something like Schindler's List, while another guy with an eye for the absurd may come up with something more like
Springtime for Hitler. A gay romp with Adolf and Eva at Berchtesgaden.
And while neither reaction is, strictly speaking, wrong, one of these writers is at far greater risk of catching hell for tackiness and not taking the subject matter seriously enough.
Well, talk about bad taste.
What the lucky ducks who have never aspired to be comedians, comic writers, or class clowns do not always intuit is that the comedian doesn't actually hurt less than his more outwardly dignified peers. He is likely hip-deep in what psychologists sometimes call a coping mechanism, or sublimation, and the painful subject matter of which he makes light has probably hurt him more than once. For instance, when writer-director Mel Brooks chatted with NPR at age 95, he recalled previewing what would become a smash Broadway hit called The Producers to an enthusiastic Chicago audience and at least one patron of the arts who had no chill about singing dancing Nazis. Some big guy kept storming up the aisle saying, "How dare you have Hitler? How dare you have the swastika? I was in World War II risking my life and you do this on stage?" I said, I was in World War II and I didn't see you there. See, as a veteran of the war in which the Allies may have done their best but were not equipped to prevent the slaughter of 10 million Jews, the very Jewish Mel Brooks was uniquely qualified to become a wellspring of crass ire toward the Nazis. And the whole time it looked like he was not taking the Holocaust seriously, thereby encouraging you not to take it seriously. His pain toward the subject matter was likely deeper than average by about 4 death valleys. So, with that slant on the comedic worldview in mind, what does it mean when someone starts joking about suicide?
The thing I don't understand about the suicide person is the people that try and commit suicide, for some reason, they don't die, and then that's it. They stop trying. What has changed? Is their life any better now? No. In fact, it's worse, because now they've found out, here's one more thing you stink at.
Well, the short answer is depends on the person. Some people will laugh at anything because they have no empathy and have never felt certain depths of pain, whereas other people are complicated and tend to be worse at communication than they think they are. Not maliciously or anything. Effective communication is just really hard.
Oh my God. What's that? I wrote Julian telling him what I was going to do.
Why?
What would be the sense of killing myself if he didn't know about it?
For instance, I have learned through trial and error and stupidity that if you're the joker who brought up suicide for laughs, the instinct of your audience will likely be either to tell you, that's not funny, don't joke about it, or become quite serious and ask some pointed questions.
Oh, hell with it. I'll take the day off.
Yeah, why kill yourself?
Between those two courses of action, the asking of some direct, judgment-free questions is not the worst instinct. Shutting down the uncomfortable conversation, on the other hand, is a terrible instinct, because if that tacky joke is the only clue you get that someone is truly troubled, you have just increased the barrier between that person and potential crisis intervention, if only by millimeters.
You know, I haven't heard your typewriter the last few days.
I'm too depressed to work. Sometimes I wish my mother had taken the pill.
I typed that last bit in my script as a placeholder and a hypothesis based on personal experience plus my dealings in the medical biz, but according to Michael Stahl at Mike.com and Maggie Vaughn, the clinical psychologist he chose to quote, a person might joke about killing themselves instead of making a straightforward plea for help because they're concerned with burdening others. Reaching out in any way to a friend or loved one about suicidal thoughts generates a high level of emotional intimacy that some might not be terribly comfortable with, and they don't want to feel uncomfortable with that level of openness and closeness. The article further recommends, if a person you love makes jokes about suicide, be safe rather than sorry. Tactfully, compassionately confront them. The worst that'll happen is that you'll forever be labeled the friend who cares too much.
What happens, you were going about it all wrong. I believe you're supposed to put your head in the stove.
Well, it's a second-hand stove. There were no directions.
If you opt to read the Mike.com article in its entirety, which I absolutely recommend to anyone in search of clues on how to help friends in dark places, you may notice that at no point do Vaughn or Stahl tell you to laugh at your friend's suicide jokes. Which is good, because a lot of suicide jokes really aren't funny, especially when they are made by people who don't care about suicide victims for people who don't care about suicide victims. See if you can spot the difference between someone who might be struggling and someone who might just be a bastard. I accidentally dialed a suicide hotline in Saudi Arabia. The first question they asked was if I knew how to fly a plane. I always feel pretentious talking about joke-telling as though it were a math-heavy STEM field, but a skilled joke-teller has to do some careful calculations regarding every syllable that gets put into or left out of each joke. In this case, the joke is bad because it is longer than it needs to be. The punchline is based on a racist assumption that all Saudi Arabians are suicide bombers, and the malice is turned outward, in hope of appealing to an equally racist, malice-fueled demographic. Now, compare that joke to... My mother told me to quit telling suicide jokes. I told her suicide is the last thing I'll do. Here we have a simple setup, a simple punchline. The message is clear, a thing you want if you are indeed making a low-key cry for help in a world allergic to sincerity. And the malice is turned inward. The teller of this joke isn't trying to hurt anyone but himself, and is skilled enough to know that he doesn't have to. This is not to say that aspiring comics or class clowns must hate themselves if they want to be funny, although most of us do. But the turning of malice inward is a pretty standard gambit for funny people in search of broad market appeal. Offend fewer people, get more of them to laugh. But the easiest way to do that is through humor centered around self-depreciation, which makes it tricky to tell which comedians are merely doing a bit and which ones are in big trouble psychologically.
I can't believe the government has the nerve to limit the ways I can hurt myself. Next thing you know, I want people to do this.
Sigmund Freud is sometimes credited with coining the phrase anger turned inward as depression, and just about every quotable comedian I can name intuitively does this to some extent. As for the ones who turn their anger outward...
Unlike the social justice warriors who are going to be out there tweeting that all the jokes are problematic.
Well, let's just say they're out there, and boy, will you hear about it if ever a comic with so much as a whisper of popularity gets challenged in regards to what is and is not okay to joke about. Travis Langley at Psychology Today reports, After analyzing online debate content while noting the seeming futility of such disputes over whether suicide is ever funny, both sides accept the same basic assumptions about how humor operates, even though each side asserts the superiority of its own humor ideology. The respective contentions that suicide can be funny or suicide is never funny exert implicit claims that each objectively understands humor better than the other. The arguments become less about persuading others to see one's own position and more about asserting that position to express personal identity and identification with that side. As a seemingly tangential note, you know how multiple experts on YouTube growth advise against holding on any one shot for more than 5 seconds? Well, I'm aware that holding on this article excerpt as long as I am puts me at risk of losing viewers with compressed attention spans. But I want us to get a good, long look at it before we crossfade into what I hope is a telling reveal, because the Psychology Today article from which this was taken is not in fact about whether or not suicide is funny. It's about whether rape is funny, and the measurable harm caused by a culture that trivializes rape-related humor.
Don't seem fair to me. Don't seem right. But you can joke about it.
Please don't misunderstand. I 100% agree with the article in its original context. The dangers of rape-related humor and its palpable potential to normalize violence against vulnerable people is a genuine problem worth discussing at length. But according to the same article, when critics express concern about rape jokes, rape joke defenders come out of the woodwork in the much maligned name of free speech. And that shit desensitizes people, makes them less inclined to ask consent, and paints the victims as whiners to those who already want to see them that way. Whereas, when someone uses that same free speech to joke about suicide, they tend to get shut down hard for a perceived threat to no one but themselves. And, I'm keenly aware that my ability to talk to you about this in the first place requires the very same free speech, so pushing for less of that is absolutely not a thing I want to do. But what does it say about our culture that rape-related humor is largely seen as more palatable than suicide-related humor? I don't know that I have the time or the wisdom to answer that question here today, but for curious folks who are still genuinely confused about what kind of person laughs at suicide, the target demographic tends to come in 2 categories. Apathetic children who will laugh at anything, especially if it makes someone else angry, or people to whom suicidal thoughts are what Adolf Hitler was to Mel Brooks, i.e., a source of tremendous pain and a formidable threat to survival at which punching up feels therapeutic. Again, if you never become comfortable enough with the topic of suicide to laugh about it, that's okay. This is one yum you can yuck to your heart's content because at the end of the day, suicide is yucky. But seeing evidence that funny people have maybe struggled with thoughts of self-harm and lived long enough to joke about it is potentially helpful, in that it makes people with similar struggles feel less alone. The first example of suicide-centered comedy I ever saw in media anywhere was a movie called Cactus Flower, a 1969 comedy for which Goldie Hawn took an Oscar, by the way. Other examples of comedies featuring suicide include The Hospital with George C. Scott, a dark comedy based on a book of some renown called MASH, The Hudsucker Proxy by the Coen brothers, The First Wives Club, another film in the Goldie Hawn collection, the MGM horror comedy entitled Igor, and Deadpool 2, which, look, I'm not explaining Deadpool 2. Either you live in the 21st century or you don't, but for my money, the most relatable contemporary example of suicide being made to look ridiculous through the lens of comedy is from a Canadian television series for theater weirdos called Slings and Arrows.
I tried to kill myself that night.
I didn't know that.
Right now! Stop it! No! Get back! Oh, get back!
Don't laugh.
Oh, God.
And the reason this particular fictional suicide attempt resonates so strongly with me is because the mood and humor surrounding it so closely resemble my own suicide attempt. Hello, fellow survivors. Plan A was to leave my dumb face off this video, because the ones that do not feature it seem to be doing well, and vulnerability is seldom rewarded online. But I got a buddy who has been sober since about 2010, and she still goes to the AA meetings, because it is her opinion that the more old-timers show up, the more evidence newcomers see that recovery is possible. So this is me showing up as someone who lived through suicidal ideation long enough to joke about it. Whether or not you find those jokes funny is totally up to you. Just maybe don't judge the people who do too harshly. The first half of the 2010s was a dark time for me, figuratively and physically. I was working night shift at a jail, and had an unorthodox gift for making friends with the most manipulative people on the planet. As it happens, one of them was in a position to nudge me into a depressive spiral, which bottomed out at me raising my eyes to the heavens and saying, Lord, I'm lost. I can't go on like this. I'm going to stop eating or drinking until I die, or you tell me what you want me to do, because I am out of ideas. I'm told that if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. But such as they were, those were my plans. Don't worry, it gets funnier. Anyway, things went according to plan for the first 10 or 12 hours, at which point my self-preservation instinct piped up and said, maybe call someone? So I called some of my less poopy friends, called off work, cried on their sofa for a little while, and eventually got some fitful rest and headed back to work the next day. Didn't feel particularly shaky at the time, but time would tell that after not eating or sleeping a hell of a lot for the last couple days, maybe going back to work was not the brightest move. And as it happened, one of our heroin addicts had a heavy-duty infection, the likes of which, from here all the way down to here, there was no skin or adipose tissue, just the naked muscle and tendons hanging out in the atmosphere. My co-workers, who knew what this looked like, saw me loading up my dope peddler wagon with Band-Aids and Tylenol and the tiny gauze pads that the dentist puts in, the little 2x2s. So one of my companions sees me packing up all the wrong stuff, and she says, have you seen this guy's wound before? I say, no. She says, let's go look at him together. So we push the dope peddler wagon down to his cell block. She loads him up with pain meds and undoes his dressing. And I have not seen muscles like this since we were working on cadavers back in school. So being my tactful, compassionate self, I'm going, neat. So far, so good. Still standing, not feeling dizzy, even while beholding the horror show. But then, my coworker tells me that we're supposed to put Dakin solution on this guy's naked muscle. For the uninitiated, Dakin solution is part bleach. So I unscrew the top, and that bleach smell smacks me in the face. And before I know it, I am on the ground. The sleeplessness, the lack of blood sugar, and the bleach fumes all converge on me at once. And the muscles of my legs go, nope! And now my companion has 2 patients to look after. She starts dabbing my forehead, making sure that I didn't hit anything on the way down. And this man, with his naked muscle, just out there in the atmosphere, has the nerve to look down at me and say, are you okay? To which I tastefully respond, I'm fine. Bet you didn't know you had this effect on women. Anyway, we all made it through the night, and I got the unorthodox privilege of crawling out of a cell block as a reward for my hubris and callous approach to this poor man's naked muscles.
These are the kind of thoughts that kept me out of the really good schools.
Anyway, to sum up, suicide isn't necessarily the okayest thing we joke about, but until we learn to have open, irony-free discussions about mental health, such jokes might be a necessary evil.
I'm coming, boys. Oh, boy, when things go wrong.
And if by chance you are the person for whom suicidal jokes indeed reflect a deep-seated desire to make the pain go away, please understand you are loved, you are not alone, and dead people can only get so many laughs. If you choose to stick around, I can't promise that things that are hurting you will go away, but I can promise that there are more laughs to be had, and more jokes to tell. As always, thank you for giving these videos a shot. Like and subscribe if you want to encourage my bad behavior online. If you hated this video lots, the robot overlords look forward to your venom-infused rant in the comments section. Until we meet again, take it easy. Loves you. Bye.